Good afternoon, and welcome to our first presidential webcast of the year. My name is Calvin Hadley, and I am a proud alum of Howard University. I currently serve as the Strategic Initiative Advisor to President Frederick, as well as the Student Ombudsman. As Student Ombudsman, it is my goal to turn your student grievances, questions, and concerns into innovative solutions designed to enhance the overall HU experience for students. Essentially, I have a position that allows me to advocate for one of the most important demographics on campus, our students, who make up the most innovative, thought-provoking, and ambitious student body in the nation. Today, we have the unique opportunity to speak one-on-one with President Frederick. Students have already submitted questions prior to the webcast via email and Twitter. But don't worry, if you have not yet submitted your questions, please feel free to interact with us live using the hashtag on Twitter, AskHUPres17, and that's the number 17, or the WHUT Facebook Live thread. We have a ton of questions and we want to get as many answered as possible, so let's jump right in.
All right, thank you.
How are you, President Frederick?
Doing well.
Good. So we'll dive right into the questions here. Students have really asked questions in a number of fields, so we'll start with the first one from the general Howard University field. What are your long-term goals for the university, and how do you feel about our current academic rigor? And that question was asked by @Wayna.
Well, long-term goals are for us to be excellent in the primary thing that we're here for, which is around academics. So tying long-term goals to academic rigor, I think is a great question. The academic rigor on campus right now, I think is very high, it's strong. I think it does need to be strengthened in order for our students to be competitive. And that means that there are a few things that must be enhanced in the environment to allow for that strengthening of the academic rigor. One is obviously the instruction from faculty has to be of the highest, and as we continue to recruit faculty, as we continue to have faculty participate in faculty development, I think we are improving in that area always. We have great faculty, but the art of teaching is one that can always be enhanced, especially to make sure it's meeting the learners of today. And then the other side of that is to make sure that all the tools that a student needs to be academically excellent and to push themselves are available. So it means the environment in which they have to study or gain instruction are of the highest level, as well as that they have all the tools, whether it's in terms of being able to access information and or have experiences outside of the classroom that help with what's going on in the classroom. And as we continue to push students to study abroad, to participate in a variety of activities in terms of who we bring as speakers on campus, and those types of things that lends itself to having a more rigorous academic environment.
Absolutely. This student wants to know, Jamila Young wants to know about what she calls the Howard Runaround. She says, how do you plan to combat the immediate managerial issues that plague the university? What do you suggest students do in order to raise that standard of expectations for the administration and for ourselves?
Yeah, well, the first thing is we've got to hold ourselves accountable all the time, and students obviously do a good job of doing that. The first thing, though, is I would challenge a little bit when we talk about the Howard Runaround. And I'll give you an example. Just yesterday on social media, a young woman posted that she was heading to the financial aid office, and I had alum chipping in, etc. She had a complaint or concern about her financial aid. I sent that to the folks in the appropriate offices to take a look, and it turned out that the student hadn't completed two things that she needed to complete that was sitting in her file that she could access via the web. So I think on both sides, we have to make sure that everybody is doing what they need to do. I've spoken about this before. When we set deadlines, we've got to have students participate in that. If everybody shows up the week of registration and wants to get everything done, that's not going to work. There's a reason why we want to access all the electronic opportunities to do that. Having said that, we're constantly pushing for improved operational efficiency. We have to operate in a more efficient manner. There's no doubt about that, and we're pushing to make sure we do that. But in order to do that, we have to be able to invest in technology as well. And that's one of the major things that will take place over the next 18 months at the university as we try to overhaul completely the infrastructure related to the university's network so that we can have that performance using technology be enhanced to the best of its ability. Training for staff is also key around customer service issues, and as well as around the issue of making sure that we're delivering services that students need in the most efficient manner that they need it. So that can't be a perspective of just us. So we need feedback in terms of how the students can hold us accountable. One of the things that we must do is to have students participate in surveys about what they like and don't like, and to be able to be using that feedback consistently. And that's one of the things that we have to roll out this academic year. The student body must have access and the capability of giving us feedback to which we can respond.
Absolutely. This next question comes from a Hilltop staffer. When can students and staff expect to see the reopening of the undergraduate library?
Yes,
Is this a possibility?
Sure, it's certainly a possibility. The undergraduate library is a project that requires anywhere, I would say, from $15 to $20 million of work in order to bring it to, I would say, the desired capacity for a present-day library on a university campus. And that's a space that is not a traditional space in a library of my time, with only quiet areas and stacks, etc. We have to be able to build spaces that are interactive, etc. And that, looking at those 3-4 floors in the undergraduate library space, the scope of work that we have right now is about $15 million. That's a project that we're going to dedicate capital funds to within the next 2 cycles in terms of the fiscal years, and a project that I hope to bring to fruition by the end of the next academic year.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about Alumni Giving. It seems like every time you have a presidential webcast, alum and students want to know about the Alumni Giving rate. Ronald Brown asks, what are you doing to increase our Alumni Giving rate? How can students help to increase this while they're currently enrolled?
Yeah, sure. The Alumni Giving rate when I took over as president was about a little over 4%. It's now just shy of 10%. So there has been a remarkable increase in terms of alumni giving. That requires a lot of effort in terms of building the infrastructure so that office can be out and around the country as well as internationally, engaging alum in many ways and fashions. What I have done is really start with the fundamentals, and the first fundamental I'll mention is just creating a portal for information to get out to our alum. What I've come to observe is that a lot of our alum have their 4 or 6 or however long they spent that period of time that they spent here at the university. That's their image of the university. And then a lot of what they measure the university by comes from how it was when they were here. Sure. Well, the contemporary experience of the student has changed, what the expectations are, the times that we're living in. And so we have to build a university that's going to meet that generation and the generation to come. So when I engage with alum, I try to bring their understanding to this is where the university is today. These are the market forces, etc. So I give several State of the University addresses during the course of the year to facilitate that. I'll do that next week, Friday, at Homecoming, which is something that we started last year. And that is really geared at the alum to give them an opportunity to understand where the university is and to also pose questions to me about where we're heading. Sure. And I think as we engage them, they get a better understanding. Students can help in many ways. One way, for instance, is if you look at the Office of Development and Alumni Relations, they now have a significant opportunity for students to participate in a telecenter where students can actually call donors to solicit them for donations. I think that's one way students can help. We are trying to have more events where donors can meet with students on campus. The reason why that's important is because I think it's important for students to hear from donors why they give to the university, what their experience was like. And so that helps foster that level of give back. And then, to be quite frank, there need to be students, I would say more student-directed efforts. Not necessarily efforts that would raise millions and millions of dollars, but again, would create a culture Sure. of why we all need to participate in fundraising. And I think those are some of the ways that students can join in. So whether they have Giving Fridays or, whatever students want to come up with. I think it's, all of those things are important, and we are creating opportunities to allow students to be able to do that.
Sure. It's interesting you mentioned culture. So a student, Taylor Ray Lavelle, mentions with regard to alumni giving, what if there was a mentor-like program in place between current students and Howard alum? Do you think that may be something that can increase alumni giving?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing that convinces people to give to this university are the students. Sure. People, I talk all over the country and all over the world about Howard. I can let people know exactly why they should give. But as I always tell donors, there's nothing like interacting with a Howard student. And once you've done that, you can be sold. There actually are mentor-mentee relationships now through the alumni associations. For instance, the Howard University Alumni Association here in Greater Washington, D.C. has a program where they assist students with career planning and so on, and those alum also present themselves as mentors to those students. And it does influence the alum who interact with the students about giving. Sure. That doesn't mean that every single living alum, and we have somewhere between 70,000 and 80,000 alum, needs to interact with every single student, but we have to create opportunities on an ongoing basis. So when we do alternative spring break, for instance, as an example, that's an opportunity for when those students go to those cities to interact with the alum association. Sure. That's an opportunity when you go out for internships and you get to companies. One of the things that we're trying to push the career office to do is to enhance our database and enhance the cooperation with the Alumni Relations Office so that we have more information about where people are, so that we could consistently be making the connections. So that even if there aren't formal mentor-mentee relationships, the key is to get as many students in contact with the alums so they can tell what their contemporary aspirations are and where they're coming from, what types of things they're going through, and what types of hopes and dreams that they have. And I think those are the things that really sell alum on why they should continue to support the university.
Sure, absolutely. So as student ombudsman, a number of students have come to me about hours across campus. So I'm going to combine two questions here. The first is, does the administration have plans to adjust gym hours? And that second question is, does the administration have plans to adjust library hours?
Yeah, so let me start with gym hours. Before, I think, discussing gym hours, we have to have a better appreciation of I would say, gym facilities, period. One of the things that we must address is we need a non-varsity facility on campus. And that's really the issue around gym hours. Before we can really get gym hours addressed, we have to have a facility dedicated to students. And one of the things in the campus master plan is a wellness center. And that's in the next phase of construction on campus, we plan to bring that wellness center to fruition. In the interim, we will be adjusting the gym hours. We recognize that the student workers around the gym, we want them all to be trained to deal with any emergency situations. And we started off, and any of the other workers, and we started off this academic year a bit behind in terms of getting them up to speed, and therefore the workforce around supervising the gym area wasn't what it should be. And we anticipate having that problem rectified as soon as possible so that we can extend those hours appropriately. But that still is an intermediary step in getting what ultimately must be a non-varsity facility for students to have access to. And then in terms of library hours, this comes up every academic year. Sure. And it builds to a point during midterm. There's a little bit of a crescendo, and then it builds again around final exams. And we've done several studies, and I've had students lead these studies to look at what the attendance is in the gym, in the library, during extended hours. And I've done it almost every semester since I've been provost. And sure enough, the number of people who actually use the library at those what I would call off-peak hours is extremely small. And we go back and forth with the librarians every year about doing it. We certainly we'll extend the hours as best we can, but again, you have 1 or 2 people in the library versus a staff of 4 to 6 people. It's always a tough balance to get to. And as we open more spaces around campus, whether it's in residence halls or, for instance, in the College of Engineering and Architecture, the new student lounge, as we open up some of those areas, the other thing I think we need to look at is extending the availability of those buildings and those study spaces as well, so that people will have accessibility around the campus fairly freely. So we certainly will extend those hours during midterms and final exams, and we'll continue to see how much we can extend it in the kind of non-peak times on campus that makes sense, so that we don't have very low utilization, which is what kind of always makes that a difficult proposition.
Sure, sure. Let's go to the topic of community and sustainability. Lachey Cook asks, given the current spread of gentrification throughout the DMV area, how does the university plan to address aging infrastructure issues both on campus and in the surrounding community?
Yeah, sure. The gentrification that has taken place around this campus has been, I would say, nothing short of remarkable. I've been here and around this campus since 1988, and I can tell you, it's if some of the things that I see today, someone had told me I would see in my lifetime, I would have, probably disputed it. What we must do is to make sure that our community ties and our community participation is extremely strong. I think it's very important and key that we continue to maintain good relations in the community, and that's foremost. So we have to develop more opportunities to interact. We do a lot now, and we do it through many different departments at the university in terms of that interaction, and we certainly have to continue to do that. So regardless of the gentrification that's occurring, we have to make sure that we are consistently interacting and drawing in our community the way that we should be.
Sure.
With respect to the gentrification itself and our response with respect to our own infrastructure, the key is that we have to capitalize the types of changes that we need in terms of the building infrastructure. And that includes having buildings that are technology, from a technology point of view, they have the right fit for today's experience. We have to make sure that, again, some of the buildings, although they have a good traditional look and feel, it's very hard to put heating and AC units by today's standards in there. The windows or things, those types of things, when you change those out, you want to make sure, again, that they have the right insulation and those types of things as well. So putting all of that together, we have a campus master plan that has been approved. And now one of the things that we have to do is to fund it. And coming out of a circumstance where the finances of the university weren't great, it was very difficult to fund that. And as we continue to improve the fiscal health of the university, that's an area that we will invest in over time. But it's going to take time to transform the campus. You look at the campus right now, there's a significant amount of what we call deferred maintenance. What does it take to improve every single thing, from paint to changing windows, et cetera? If you look at it across the campus, you're talking about something probably well north of $300–400 million today. So it does require significant capital investment over time, and that's one that we must commit to over time. But it means that fundraising has to be, at its peak. It means that the students we're attracting, we've got to make sure that we're collecting on tuition, et cetera. We have to have a hospital that's running efficiently, if we do own a hospital still, so that there's not a drain on the university's finances. So all of those things must work in tandem in order for us to bring those types of things. We have to have research and researchers who are bringing in grant dollars that can go towards indirect expenses that also help us with some of those improvements as well.
Sure. Let's go to a couple of questions from some specific demographics. So let's start with student athletes. Trayvon Hunt, who I believe is a football player, asks, why doesn't athletics play a major role on campus? Can we get involved in more campus activities to get students more involved with athletic events and/or games?
Yeah, so it's interesting that Trayvon has that question. This year, I made a decision to have the athletic director report directly into the vice president for student affairs and to myself. And I did that specifically to get student affairs more connected with athletics so that they can collaborate and come up with more opportunities where we can bring students to events who traditionally may not go to athletic events so that they can see what's happening. The second thing is we have to do a better job of communicating exactly what is happening with athletics. We have a couple of teams that are winning.
Sure.
And unfortunately, I don't think they get enough credit because we only think of the major sports. Well, we have 19 Division I sports. You've got a women's volleyball team that I think would rival just about any volleyball team in the country right now. Division I volleyball team, and I don't think we promote them enough. You know, their games aren't sold out. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I don't see somebody in the MEAC necessarily beating them, and I see them having a good path potentially to another NCAA tournament berth. I think we have to push that. You know, yes, football is a major sport, basketball is a major sport, but those are two of the 19 Division I sports that we have on this campus. The women's soccer team also is another team that is winning and doing well. And then the last thing I would say is, you know, college athletics, I don't see it as a hobby. It is a competitive environment, and you must win, which is the other thing. So yes, you want people to come out and support, but they also want to come out and support winning teams. That's the nature of athletics. I don't know any team in the country that doesn't win and would maintain, regardless of what effort you put out, you know, people coming out every time. Over time, you're going to erode the fan base support, you know. Even at the pro level, that happens. So we clearly have to make sure as well that the teams are performing, you know, at the best level. And so we have to also create that environment to allow Trayvon and his teammates to be able to win as well.
Sure, absolutely. Let's take a question from an HU parent, Lay Mills. I am a Howard University parent. Whatever happened to the proposed unlimited student Metro passes? Having an all-access Metro pass would be invaluable to Howard University students and their parents.
Yeah, great question. I'm not sure it would be invaluable, but great question. And let me tell you why I don't think it would necessarily be invaluable. We initially spoke to Metro about doing that, and the cost we think will be between $100 and $120 a semester for every student on the undergrad campus. That involves every single student having to pay that fee, whether or not they use the Metro Pass. So the first part of that process is we have to make sure the students buy into that, and I believe that they have. And they've gone about a formal process of getting a vote done and so on. So we've also put it before the Board of Trustees, who've also approved it, and our intent is to bring it. However, I do have a concern, and that is to make sure that Metro is functioning at an optimal level. Sure. Right? So Metro has had several problems which are well documented over the course of the past 12 months. And I am concerned, and I have expressed this to Metro, that once we do sign up and I have my students having this access, the hours have to be consistent. When we first got into it, they had late hours of closing at 12 and a little after 12, and that has now been turned down on some of the lines to 10 p.m. For students who want to study late, you know, that may be a significant inconvenience. They've had some safety issues. I certainly don't want to call any parent and say, you know, I'm sorry to inform you that something has happened to your son or daughter riding Metro, which we encourage them to do. And therefore, I think that Metro also has to give us some assurance that there's a certain level of safety that will occur. And those are, you know, two of my main concerns. But I do agree it would be useful. I think it would be valuable. But again, we've got to make sure it's done in a way that satisfies our needs to make sure we protect our students, and first and foremost, that it's safe, and then that we do get the service that they're signing up and paying for.
Sure, absolutely. Another demographic is our veterans on campus. Eric Smith, a veteran, asks, what is your perspective on Veterans Affairs? And how does the president propose to help veterans transition into Howard University?
Yeah, so Kenneth Holmes, who is now our VP for Student Affairs, oversees, you know, that entire umbrella area. And this is one of the areas when I was interviewing for Vice President for Student Affairs, one of the areas that I wanted to make sure the incoming Vice President would have an expertise in or have some significant experience from his prior employment and he does. And what he's going to do is to go about making sure that we build the infrastructure around that. We have to have individuals working in that office that are very familiar with the veteran benefits, how to access them, how to assist the students with getting those things processed in a very efficient manner. And so he's working on that to make sure that we have that. We also have to make sure that the campus also can accommodate the veterans in a better fashion, and that's one of the areas that we have to improve in. Some of that is infrastructure, in terms of making sure that the buildings have the right accessibility for those who need a certain kind of accessibility to buildings. But we also have to make sure that faculty and staff alike are also prepared to engage with veterans as well, and to make sure that they understand the circumstances that they're coming from, and that all our services can accommodate them appropriately, them and their families. And that's another area, again, that we have to invest in to make sure that that happens. So I think with the new Vice President for Student Affairs, I think he has a good understanding of that, and he's going to help us build the infrastructure so that we can do that, because we want to encourage as many veterans as possible to come to Howard University and to have a good experience. But we recognize that we have to provide the right types of services and environment in order for them to be satisfied with what we're doing.
Good. I think that leads to a follow-up that Eric sent. Will Veterans Affairs stay in Special Student Services, or will that be moved elsewhere on campus?
Yeah, I can't quite answer that, simply because that's a decision obviously the Vice President for Student Affairs needs to make, and obviously I'll take his advice, in terms of direction.
Okay. Let's talk about social justice. We're living in unique times in this country, and a Hilltop staffer wants to know, what is your stance on Howard University students taking charge in social justice and advocacy in 2016? Do you encourage your administrators, faculty, and staff to do the same?
Yeah, absolutely. Social justice is not an issue that we turn on when we come to Howard University at 8 o'clock and then we turn off at 5. It's something that we're living every moment of the day, and everybody who works here certainly participates in the environment and the community around them. And there are issues about social justice all around us today, probably more so than at any other time, especially for the young people who are at Howard right now. So I absolutely encourage them to participate. How they participate, though, I think is just as important as whether or not they participate.
Sure.
The content of our participation is important, and I encourage that. So at opening convocation, the faculty marshal, the university faculty marshal, as an example, informed me the night before that she was going to sit during the national anthem, and she was concerned as to whether or not I would want her to continue as the university faculty marshal, or whether or not I would even want her to discharge those duties on the day, etc. And I immediately responded to her. I called her to tell her, it's not going to have any impact on whether you do it or not, and you're more than welcome to sit during the anthem. But I think what's important, Calvin, is when we stand back up after the anthem is done, how do we stand back up? Do we stand back up with conviction, or do we stand back up and just go about our business? Do we stand back up and walk towards the issue, towards the fire, with a solution in hand? Or do we go back to business as usual? Do we stand back up and help those around us in our society who are less fortunate? Or do we go back to the comfort of our homes and tell people that we sat during the anthem and, that ticked that box? So I am all for us, advocating and doing things around social justice. But that can't just become a cliche comment. It has to become action, especially on this campus. The people that have made this campus great were people that stood up in times of adversity and made a difference in the world around them. And we have to honor their legacy by continuing to do that, and not just participating in what we think is social justice by sitting down during an anthem or by tweeting 140 characters about how upset we are about something. We've got to get out there and make a difference in the community.
Absolutely. Let's take a couple of questions live from Twitter. Winter Santiga at Up20Chief asks, there have been several car break-ins the past 2 weeks by Drew Hall. Any plans to increase security in that area?
Yeah, I mean, that's the first I'm hearing of that. We have a crime alert that goes out for any type of crime that takes place on campus. And I can't say that I've seen some type of a spike, but bringing that to my attention, I'll certainly discuss it with the chief. Anytime we have an area of any increased type of activity like that, whether it's robberies, in terms of personal, robberies or assaults or anything of that nature, we certainly try to direct resources. And if that's the case near Drew Hall, we'll certainly get the police chief on that. The one thing I do want to encourage, though, is that those things are brought to our attention immediately, so that we do have by law a requirement that we do report those things to the wider community as part of alerting them according to the Clery Act. But also in terms of how we direct resources, it's very good for us to get that intel as soon as possible. One of the unique things about our campus is that all of the streets that surround our campus and are embedded within the campus are public streets. So we have to work very well with the Metropolitan Police Department to ensure that all of the environments are safe, and so that any action we're taking, we always want to coordinate with the local police force as well.
Good. Many of us turned on the television 2 weeks ago and saw you with Shawn Combs with a big check in your hand. Khalees at Divine AC Engine asks, how do we apply for the money donated to the university by Shawn Combs or any other funds that can help us cover our balance?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First, let me take an opportunity to express my gratitude to Shawn. Shawn has become a friend over time. We were both here at Howard at the same time, and what he has gone out and done with his own career, I think we all need to recognize, and I was very pleased to be able for him to receive an honorary degree at my hand at our commencement. His giving back is exactly the type of thing that we must celebrate and we must talk about. To the question earlier about giving back, and he was very passionate about this opportunity. We will put out information about how you could apply for those, and financially it actually has a significant volume of information that they give to students. They send out tweets as well about opportunities to get scholarships, etc. Specifically in this one, there will be an application process. The dean of the School of Business would be involved in that process, and as you can imagine, it's a gift we recently received, so we're in the process of building all of the information around that, what the application process would look like, how people apply, how many we would give, etc. And just to clarify, because as you can imagine, I've received, people don't see you publicly with a check for $1 million and don't send a request immediately
Sure.
after asking for money. It's an endowment.
Okay.
And the way that works is that we put that money into our overall endowment, we invest it, and we come up with an agreement with the donor of how much of it we will spend every year. And generally speaking, give or take, a little bit, we generally spend about 5% of the endowed funds every year. So just to be clear, $1 million won't be available every year to give out scholarships from this endowment, but that helps the endowment be there for perpetuity.
Sure.
And the way it would work is that as we gain interest on it from the investments, et cetera, and we spin off the spending amount every year, people would always be able to benefit long after the gift would have been totally spent if it wasn't endowed.
Absolutely. K. Brash at Brash Gentleman asks, have there been plans for further development of East Campus / Divinity School been finalized? What is the status?
Right, it's not finalized yet. We have received some feedback. We brought a team in, and this is a team that travels the country and does this type of work, give advice on what you should do with historic buildings or potential development opportunities, etc. They've given us some feedback about what that looks like. We've worked with the community to get their input, and we're now at the stage where we're going to be sending out an RFP to get a developer to come in and try to formalize those plans and put those out there. This is a very sensitive one. The location of the East Campus is in the middle of a very vibrant neighborhood. And so we really wanted to take our time and make sure that we interacted with that community well and got their input. We've gotten a lot of input from the students and faculty and staff who occupied that building previously, and We think we're just about ready to go with bringing in a developer to give us some ideas about, what that should look like. And then again, we'll put that out to the entire Howard community as well as that neighborhood and try to get everybody's approval, get everybody on board, and then we'll move forward.
This is a very big year for Howard. I think a lot of years are big years for Howard, but this is an especially large one. And K. Brash asked a follow-up question, or a second question. It says, what are the plans for the 150th anniversary of the university?
Yeah, well, I agree. Celebrating the sesquicentennial of any institution, especially a higher ed institution in this country like a Howard University that was started as a university is a huge moment for us. It's a moment for us to pause and reflect on where we've been, but it's also a moment for us to be bullish about where we're heading. And I think it's important that we take this opportunity to do that. For those of you who don't know, obviously you, Calvin, are one of the co-chairs of the Sesquicentennial Committee, along with the Dean of the Law School, Daniel Holly Walker. There's a Sesquicentennial Planning Committee. The first thing that committee needed to do was to really agree on what the theme would be in terms of how we celebrate. And that theme is "The time is always now." And I think that's apropos for the time that we're in. Howard has always been part of creating history. But at the time that we were doing that, we weren't focused on the fact that we were creating history, but we were focused on the fact that we were doing the right things. And that's a big part of what our celebration is going to be like. We will roll out the series of activities. It would involve different academic things, as you could imagine, in terms of talks and symposia. We'll celebrate our Charter Day on March 2nd, 2017. As we always do, that is a Thursday this year, so opening convocation will probably fall on a Friday. We have our Charter Day dinner. That will obviously take on a slightly different feel because it's the 150th in terms of how we celebrate. And then we intend from January 1 to December 31st to celebrate the 150th year. We've already started. We've had a couple of activities already. We had a conversation with Ambassador Young as one of the activities. We have a couple activities coming up in the Department of History on Reconstruction. You'll see that. I think that's going to be a very interesting opportunity as well. And we will have a website, and we will put out all of this information hopefully within the next few weeks.
Great. At See Your Path, So See Your Path asks, as HU has always been a beacon for the Black diaspora, why no developed plans for a grad Africana Studies department?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there are no plans for that activity. I would say academic thrust, as it will, academic ventures on any higher ed campus must come from the students and faculty, as opposed to being thrust on them by administration. I have seen a proposal for studies at the doctorate level around such a program, and those are things that we're working through right now to make sure that it is the right and matured enough proposals so that we can put it before the board to get that approved. But more importantly, just stepping back from such a very focused and isolated academic offering, we also have to look at the context of the university in its contemporary state and make sure that we're always speaking to what must be known and then what could be useful as it is known. And so we have to make sure that we have the right blend. The context that Howard University has been in every decade since its founding has changed significantly. Right? We've gone from a country where higher ed institutions were completely segregated to a Brown versus the Board of Education that Howard University had a lot to do with, to opportunities now where, for the most part, any student from the African diaspora in this country can go anywhere to go to school. And therefore, what we offer, we are no longer the only place that someone could go to. We still, however, are the leading place that people can go to, or the leading producers of students in certain fields, and we have to keep that in mind as well. But we have to take that entire compendium of offerings and make sure that whatever it is we add, we have to be just as responsible with finite resources to make sure that we're consistently looking to make sure that we're not just simply adding things, but we also are not participating in things where we can't be excellent, or we're just participating because we always have been. So yes, it's a very focused question, and something that I myself would support and like to see. It has to come up from the faculty and the student ranks, but it also has to be taken in the context of the full compendium of what we offer as well.
Absolutely. This next question is on work study. Ayana Smith. Why is there an issue with giving students their work study placement before the middle of the semester?
Yeah, a big part of it is really assessing what the needs are. And I think based on the emails that I've seen, and I think I'm familiar with this particular student because I think I've seen a few emails from her. One of the things that the new financial aid director is looking at is to make sure that those assignments, to her point, are made ahead of time. But assessing the workforce in all the different areas has to be a part of that. We know how many student workers we're going to be able to afford going in, but we have to get information from the departments as to what their needs are. And in some circumstances where departments may have made commitments to students, their budgets may have changed, et cetera, and their ability to accommodate student workers may have changed as a result. So those are things that administratively we need to take care of in the summer and over the winter break ahead of students showing up so that we can have that work more efficiently.
Absolutely. So to piggyback off of the Shawn Combs question, a student asks, what can communication students expect from the Kathy Hughes donation and the subsequent renaming of the School of Communication? Will they have increased access to new resources like up-to-date technology and more camera and recording equipment?
Yeah, so the donation and what the dean plans to do with that is something that she's going to work out with the faculty and students in School of Communications. It's not prescriptive in terms of she has to do this versus that, and I think they have to look at their own needs and to do that. The second part of the question in terms of the environment that the students are in and the equipment, et cetera, one of the things that I've committed to is to making sure that we bring a new building for the School of Communications. And that's not a small investment. That's a major investment that will occur over time, but it's one that I am fully committed to making. And that will come with equipment and the right types of things that would enhance the environment that I think students are looking for. And that's where that support would really come from and the thrust around that.
Sure. An anonymous person from the Hilltop asks, a common complaint amongst campus residents is that of the lack of clean facilities within the classroom and dormitories across campus. Any plans to change that?
So we have our facilities function outsourced to Thompson Facilities. And I think that they have done an improved job over time in terms of deploying the workforce and making sure the environment is enhanced. I'm saddened to hear that clearly some people don't think that that's the case, but that's something that we will certainly get back to them about. They have certain performance standards that they have to meet, and some of that is tied to how we pay them as well. So one of the things that we obviously have to do is to get feedback and surveys again from students and staff and faculty alike to make sure that the environments are better. I mean, the feedback that I've received is that it has improved. It's not where we want it to be completely, but I've gotten feedback that it has improved. So we'll continue to work to make sure that it's optimal. This is not an area that we can afford any type of substandard environment. So I will certainly follow up with that.
Sure. Student asks, what is your view on the NCAA sanctions of the Howard athletics based on academic performance? If our football team cannot perform on the field or in the classroom, what is the real value?
Yeah, so again, I think that's a slight misunderstanding of what those sanctions look like, et cetera. And this is an issue that gets discussed a lot nationally and trying to get our arms around what needs to be done in order for you to have it at the right place is a little bit technical, and obviously it requires a much more complicated answer. But just to give you a little soundbite, every team has to submit an academic progress report, and embedded in that academic progress report is a series of data points that look at how the students are performing, the number of credits they've attempted, their GPA, etc. So it's a wide variety. So on a team with 60-something players, 50-something scholarship recipients, that can be very complicated. What majors they're taking, all of those types of things, and you put that into a mix, obviously, to come up with the eventual score. One of the things about the Howard athlete that I think is underappreciated is that Howard athletes actually graduate at a higher rate than the rest of the student body. That's number one. Number two, if you compare conference to conference, they also graduate at a much significantly higher rate. So what that also means is that we tend to carry athletes, we are more likely to carry athletes much longer than probably most of the teams, for instance, in the bigger conferences, such as the SEC as an example. So that also means that those students, how they compute into that APR score is also going to be an ongoing issue, as opposed to if you have a one and done situation, sure. Right? If you have somebody come in one year, even if they mess up academically and you win the championship and they're gone, what they have contributed to your APR for the next 2 or 3 years is gone. Sure. Whereas we have a Howard athlete that is persisting, and in that persistence, they may have some academic challenges with the demands of playing a sport as well, and so their GPA may not be as high, and we understand that, but the point is they're much more likely to go on to finish. Sure. And when you compare those two athletes, I would still say that our athletes have the better outcome. So I would not be as, dismissive of, why have a football team if they're not performing, because we get NCAA sanctions around some of those academic progress issues. I mean, they want the athletes to perform at a certain level, and we recognize that, and we push them around tutoring and those types of things. But some of them will end up having challenges.
Sure. Student at Virgil_Parker asks, how would you define and hope to sustain the legacy of Howard University?
So, my job, I think, around legacy issues is that, and I try to make this clear to everyone, there's only one legacy that exists on this campus, and that's the Howard legacy. That is intact in terms of what Howard has been, what it has meant, not just to this nation, but to the world, and in terms of its people, who Howard University is. What I strive to do every day is to make sure that I remove any obstacles from us continuing to just live that every day. And I think that that's key, because we often talk about legacy in terms of a rearview mirror point of view, or what are we going to do then? And I think just as we celebrate the 150th, I think the theme is apropos. The time is always now. And I think sometimes we have to just take a pause and make sure that today we are doing what it is we need to do. And so, yes, as much as I want that legacy to thrive and for people to be able to say great things about Howard 50 years from now, I have to make sure that the students who are here right now aren't waiting for that legacy to be realized, or aren't living on the legacy that has gone in the past, but that they themselves are building an experience and having an experience that will ensure that legacy. And I think if we all focus on just making sure that we have the best environment today, I think we secure that legacy that we often talk about.
Sure, absolutely. I think a good follow-up question from the same student is, you mentioned a very significant year at Howard. The culture has been ever-changing. Can you give us your opinion about the ever-changing culture at the university?
Yeah, I think that's a good question as well, because I think that goes back to what I was referencing with alum. We all have our, for me it was, my 6-year block of time when I did my first 2 degrees, in terms of what I saw in Howard University between 1988 and 1994. And then going back again for my MBA between 2009 and 2011, I saw a different Howard University from a student's perspective. And that culture that we talk about, that is Howard, and whether it's changing and what it's changing to, etc., I think sometimes we probably worry about that too much, right? I hear a lot of that cynicism all the time from alum. These young people aren't like us. They don't protest. They don't do this. And I disagree. They do it in their own way, right? And my parents probably weren't too happy with decisions I made because I did it differently from them. But that's part of what life is about, right? If everything stayed static and we all did it the same way in every different era, I don't think we'd be making any kind of progress or seeing anything that we would want to be proud of if you came back and it was the same way 50 years ago,
Sure.
or people had the same mindset that you had some 50 years ago. I think the young people today are doing the types of things that they need to do. And so again, my role is to make sure that that I keep the obstacles out of their way, right? So students tweet today, they use social media, that's a part of the culture. Sure. When I was a student, we wrote letters, right? So it's a different culture. Students' ability to react quickly to something that has happened. And not just to react, but to react to something that has happened across the world is very different, right? When I was here, a major hurricane hit Jamaica, as an example, and being from the Caribbean, that was a concern. When I was here, there was a major coup in Trinidad where the government was taken over. Getting information about that was difficult. CNN didn't even have a picture back then of what was happening on the ground in Trinidad. They just had a map of the Caribbean and they pointed out where Trinidad was. Today, if there's a coup in Trinidad, we probably have live images streaming within 30 minutes. It's a different time we live in. So the way that impacts the culture, the way information gets passed on, all of that, I think is unique, and I also think it's great. And I think that what we have to do is embrace it rather than always complain and compare it to some other time. Sure. And so my perspective is I just need to get out of the way and to make sure that there are no barriers to the students being able to experience whatever that culture is today in a safe, and enhancing environment.
Sure, absolutely. Let's get to a little bit more lighthearted question. Next week is a very big week on campus. Some people call it their favorite time of year, homecoming. Student asks, students and alum have been waiting in great anticipation of who will be performing at this year's homecoming events. Could you give us a hint as to who's performing, and is it true that WHUR-Fest is coming back?
Yeah, so WHUR-Fest is coming back. I don't know if I'm authorized to talk about who is going to perform, but I would say this, one of my favorite artists, and I think he keeps it real. I think he is a common person and the right kind of person to perform at WHUR-Fest as we bring it back. Will be there, and I think people will be pleased when they see him. Okay. And I think the rest of the performers at the other events as well, I think people are going to be happy to see those people as well. I don't think people are going to say nah when they hear the folks who are performing. And I think, again, it is what it should be at Howard Homecoming, and you have to have top-notch performers. But most importantly, we want to create a safe environment and to make sure that everybody has a great time. I also don't want to discount the opportunity to have to attend the open houses in each of the schools and colleges. We're going to have the alum have an opportunity to do that, and we want to make sure that the alum take advantage of that. Meet the dean, meet the students, meet the faculty in the classrooms and in the buildings, so that they can hear what they're doing and what plans they have for their academic year.
I think I'll take a quick moment of moderator's privilege and follow up on that. We are both Howard alum, and I'd like to ask you, what is your favorite Howard homecoming experience, either as a student, an administrator, or as an alum?
I have many, as you can imagine. I'm not sure what number homecoming this would be, but this is well over 20. And so I really love homecoming. It certainly is one of my favorite times of the year. I would say one of my favorite experiences was probably one of my first homecomings. I was walking up by Crampton. I saw a white car coming up, convertible, pretty big guy in the driver's seat, and looked over, and it was Heavy D, who at the time was one of my favorite performers. And I was amazed that nobody was running up to him, nobody was doing anything. Everybody just acted like this is what it's about. Another homecoming at the game, I believe it was at halftime of the game, LL Cool J walked across the field, and half the crowd was cheering, half was booing, because at the time he was in a major feud with another fairly popular artist as well. I mentioned those things because I think the celebrities who came to Howard's homecoming, I was able to always, and I am still always, I'm amazed at how much they enjoy it because they come to our homecoming. And that's one of the things that I think resonates with me, that their appreciation for what is happening on this campus and the culture and their willingness to participate in it says a lot about who we are and why we should have a better appreciation of who we are and what we do at that time. And it's really the people that make all those things work, right? Having all the alum come back, mixing in with the students, etc. That's what really makes those events. I mean, people are happy to see others they haven't seen in a while. But just as importantly, the alum are happy to see students who, in a lot of ways, remind them of who they were back then. And then they can really be reflective in terms of how much has changed since that time. And I think that's why it's also such a special time as well.
Absolutely. So we're going to end with two questions, one on accountability and the other on finances. And I'll combine them in the effort to combine time here. The first is, many administrators never answer their emails or phones and are not available for students. Do you have an accountability plan for these administrators and/or professors? And the second question we'll ask is, can you tell us about the financial outlook of Howard University currently, and where are we going in the future?
Yeah, you know, everybody has office hours. That's a standard practice, and that's one of the things that I insist that everybody do, and that's something that we obviously can enhance in terms of people having accessibility. One of the things that we're trying to get out of is we're heavy customer facing in terms of having to do a lot of stuff in the offices, and I want us to get out of doing that so that people can spend time responding to messages, answering the phones, etc., as opposed to having students have to come to the office. But again, that means that everybody has to adhere to deadlines, and we have to operate efficiently and leverage the technology. In terms of the financial outlook, it's much better. We've ended the year with the hospital with a $4.5 million profit last year after, that's 2 or 3 years ago, having a $58 million loss. So it's a significant turnaround that has occurred. We still are attracting a student who can't afford to be here, and so net tuition is under pressure as we continue to give more financial aid. We have to be better, but we have to do a better job of collecting what is owed to us, and we have to emphasize that to everybody involved. We ended May with $22 million of uncollected tuition from students. So when you think of what that could be put back into in terms of capital improvements, it's a gap. But that means that we also have to help students figure out how they're going to pay for their education.
Sure, sure. Well, President Frederick, it has been an honor and a pleasure to interview you. I think we've touched on something from about every field, from finances to homecoming. I personally want to thank you as an alum and as a student, and I want to make sure that students have a full understanding of who I am as the Student Ombudsman. That is going to conclude our question and answer period, but before we do so, students, if you have grievances, concerns, questions, if you need answers to those grievances or concerns in between now and the next upcoming presidential webcast, I would love for you to reach out to me personally as your Student Ombudsman. You can reach out to me via email at hustudentadvocate@howard.edu, or you can come by and try to physically make a meeting with me. My office is located on the 4th floor of the administration building. President Frederick, thank you very much for your time today. Students, thank you very much for your phenomenal questions. Howard University, have a phenomenal day.
Thank you.